In this episode, I talk about wacky-shaped pens, what's in the Goulet supply closet, and I pick a pen for every day of the week. Well, hey there, Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, and it is episode number 132 of Goulet Q&A, and I'll be the first to say, who else would say it, but let me just start off by saying this is going to be a little bit different Q&A just because I'm shooting this really out of order. Jenny, our videographer, is going to be gone on her service week during when this is going to be publishing, so I'm actually shooting this like a week and a half early. It's going to completely out of timeline, so I have no like timely updates or anything to give you in this Q&A, but I crammed in an extra one on top of when I already recorded a different one because I don't want you guys to be without a Q&A. So I figured something was better than nothing. So I like dug back into old questions that I didn't answer and stuff like that, and thought I would pick some good ones and try and give you like a, it's not really a bonus Q&A because it's not extra for you, but it's one that wouldn't normally have happened otherwise. So it might be a little bit shorter as a result of that, but I went ahead and picked 7 questions for you that I think I can answer this week. So I hope you still enjoy it, even though it's not quite the same rhythm as a normal Q&A. That's still okay. At least we got it out. So I'm going to start off with some pen and writing questions. This is from snorkez.brf on Instagram. Will slow altitude changes, mountain climbing, affect my pens? I'm going hiking soon. Of course, by the time I answer this question, you've probably already gone, but and it will be going through some drastic yet slow altitude changes. Should my pens be fine? Well, so I've answered some questions about like flying with pens, which is usually the kind of scenario that people run into. I have a fountain pen one-on-one video. You should check that out. But the physics are going to be the same whether you're flying, driving, hiking, whatever. If you're going through a drastic altitude change, your pen is going to undergo the same pressure changes as it would no matter what method is actually happening. The difference here is that when you're flying, you're usually starting at, whatever altitude that it is. There's no planes that fly at like, mountaintop level, unless you're in like Colorado or like parts like that. But, usually you're starting wherever you are and you're always going up, and you're going up a pretty significant amount. However, with planes, you have, pressurized cabins. So you're going to run into a situation where it's going to pressurize the cabin once it reaches a certain altitude, and it's going to stay there. Whereas if you're hiking and you're going a pretty drastic amount, the pressure will continue changing because there's no, pressure cabin that you're in when you're hiking. Now that said, I'm not a pilot. I don't know exactly how all planes work and if they're all the same, but from some pilots that I've talked to about the whole fountain pen thing, they say typically planes are pressurized to be at about 6,000 to 8,000 foot elevation. That pressure, that whatever pressure that is, that's where they pressurize the cabin to go to. So if you're in the mountains and you're hiking from 6,000 to who knows where, you've got a ways to go. So I would say if you're going to be going within a 6,000 or so altitude, foot altitude change, you can expect to have some similar results as to what you'd have on a plane. Now, if you're going 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000, it's going to be, proportionally less drastic than that. If you're starting at sea level and going to 14,000 feet, I don't know where that would be the case, but probably not anywhere. But if you're going somewhere super drastic like that, of course, it would be even more drastic of a change. So follow all the rules you do when you're flying with a pen. So make sure your pen is either completely empty or completely full, because it's the air inside the pen that is causing, pressure to increase or decrease that affects the ink coming out of the pen. That's kind of the whole deal with flying or altitude changes or whatever. You don't want the ink to be burping out of the pen. So if you have just a little bit of ink and a lot of air, ink is mostly water, so it doesn't actually change its density based on pressure, but air does. So the higher the pressure, the more likely it's going to be to spit out. So what's happening inside your pen is the air that you have in there is staying at your current whatever level that you're at. As you're going to a higher elevation, the surrounding air is actually dropping in pressure. So inside your pen has a higher air pressure. And the higher the pressure it gets, it would be likely to spit the ink out of the pen. Now, I've flown with pens intentionally with like nibs down, half filled with ink and stuff like that to try to get like a big dramatic spill. And it just is harder to do than you would think it would be. I think it was much more common like way back in the day when they had a lot of bladder filling pens, or maybe if you have a piston filling pen that's really large ink capacity or something like that, you could run into that situation, but it's far less common than you think. So I don't know that I would necessarily sweat it too much. I think basically if you follow the basic rules of either keeping it completely empty or completely full, and then if you just keep the nib pointed up, then any pressure change that you would happen to encounter would equalize itself, because the air that would be in the pen would be at the nib, and so you wouldn't have a major leaking issue. If you had the ability to do that, depending on how you're packing and stuff, you may not. But if you have any influence over it all, as far as which orientation your pen is in, have the nib pointed up, and you should be in pretty good shape. But that's about it. Once you're up to your elevation, you can write with the pen and everything. It shouldn't be a problem at all. And then coming down, you don't have to worry about it at all, because coming down, the surrounding environment would be increasing in pressure as you're descending. This goes for plane or hiking or whatever. And so it would actually be forcing back into the pen. So you're not going to run into any leaking issues there. All right, this next question I have is actually kind of similar, or at least builds upon the other one. It's got a couple altitude questions. All right, so this one is from journalandpen on Instagram. It says, you did a segment on flying with fountain pens, did they leak, etc., but it didn't cover writing at altitude. I'm sorry if I missed it, but if I didn't, is it okay to write at altitude, or are you more likely to have ink or flow problems? I don't think you're more likely to have problems, because really the issue that you have is on your ascent. You know, when you're going through the major pressure altitude changes, that's when you're more likely to have problems. So you don't want to be writing. Not that you would probably be doing this anyway, but you never know. You wouldn't want to be writing as you're taking off, especially the first minute or two as you're doing your heaviest ascension. And then once you hit 6,000 to 8,000 feet, somewhere around there, your cabin's going to equalize and it's going to be good to go. So then you can pull your pens out, you can write, and you'll be in pretty good shape. Through the remaining, even the rest of the ascent, you should be okay. And then while you're stabilized and while you're descending is not a problem at all. You can write until you land, because the pressure from the outside is forcing ink back into the pen instead of out like it is on the ascent. So you can definitely write with it. The only thing I can say is if you're writing and it has a particular level of flow, I've never really noticed. I've written with fountain pens while I've been flying before. I haven't noticed anything drastic as far as how the ink flows or anything like that. It's definitely not going to be more likely to burp and stuff unless you're pulling the pen out and it just, is kind of initially equalizing after you've ascended. But once you've kind of stabilized and you've been writing with a pen, it's not like it's going to be more likely to burp and leak and stuff like that, or if the flow is going to be heavier and all that kind of stuff. I think it should pretty much be okay, because ink is really working by capillary action. It shouldn't really be impacted by your altitude. But I don't know, I guess if a pen is like really borderline and stuff, if you've got like a pen that's really dry, I don't know. That's a really good question. But in my writing and experiments and stuff, I've never noticed any difference whatsoever in the pens I've been writing with during flight as opposed to at ground level. So I think you should be okay. All right. This question is from theguywithasuit on Instagram. Hi Brian, I know there are some wacky-shaped pens out there, like the Visconti Divina Elegance Maxi with an amazing swirl pattern. I was wondering, what is the most interesting pen shape you and your staff have come across? Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. You get into like certain limited editions and stuff like that. I would say one of the, I don't know if I could call it the wackiest, but one of the ones that definitely stands out in my mind was the Montegrappa Chaos pen. If you've seen that, it's an unbelievably expensive limited edition that was promoted by Sylvester Stallone. It's got like skulls and crosses, or like skulls and swords and snakes and stuff like all around it, and it's this big like crazy looking pen. That is definitely, I don't even know if I guess it's a shape technically, but it's it's a limited edition, so you run into a lot of that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff is really in a league of its own. I would say that one might take the top, but I do really like the Divina, and I have the Divina here, which is a pen that you mentioned. It's one of my favorite pens, especially in terms of its design. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little closer. So this one is, I don't think I'm on autofocus here. All right, well, that's all right. I won't zoom in that close then because it'll get kind of fuzzy on you. So this pen is really kind of unique because it does have this, what you call the swirl pattern. It's really, this is engraved sterling silver. Not engraved, sorry, it's inlaid sterling silver. So the pen itself is a 5-sided pen. So it's a pentagonal design, pentagonal facet, if you will, that twists around the pen as it tapers. And then it has these silver inlays in here. It's unbelievably complicated to manufacture. And in fact, Visconti has told me they should charge more than they do for this pen. They just really love it and it's expensive enough, so they leave it where it is. So that's the situation with this pen. And I love the pen. I think this design is one of the most interesting ones. There's all kinds of stuff that Visconti has on their site about exactly what this design really means, but really it's one of the ones that I think is very interesting. So I like that one. Some other pens of note that I have that are just kind of interesting, not any of the like crazy limited ones, but some pens that I just wanted to kind of show. So I have a Lamy Persona here. This is a pen that was from the 90s that's no longer made anymore. It's got this really interesting kind of clip like this. And then it's got this very interesting kind of fluted design, and then these, this grip that's kind of fluted going the opposite direction with this wraparound nib. Very interesting pen. I have not seen one quite like this. The Lamy did just come out with the Emporium, which has kind of a similar grip a little bit to this one. I think that's maybe where they found some of the inspiration, but very interesting pen with kind of this like fat, like bulbous end to it. I don't know, very, very unique. Another one, this is another Visconti pen, but this is what they call squaring the circle. So it's a squared pen with very rounded edges. So it just ends up with a very interesting kind of pattern to it. So it's nice because it makes it so that it's generally round, but yet it won't roll off the table and stuff like that. So this is on their Opera Master. They have the Opera Metal as well. They'll have that. This one happens to be the Blue Swirl, which is a limited edition that's not available anymore. But interesting pen there. Visconti does a lot of interesting designs. Another one would be the Kaweco Sport. So a lot of you are very familiar with this pen, but it's a very thin pen. This little tube-like thing, but then it has a hexagonal top, which is kind of unique to that pen. Keeps it from rolling away and stuff too, which is nice. And then keeping with Kaweco, they have the Lilliput, which I think is just this fun little like Dr. Mario pill shaped pen. Not particularly wacky, but I don't know. I think it's one of the more interesting shapes that's out there. Very handy little pocket pen. And there's probably some other interesting ones out there. Feel free to leave some comments on the YouTube or on the blog if you have something you'd like to share. All right, I got an ink question here. This is from Chris P on Facebook. Says, "Hi Brian, I was talking with my 9-year-old about Diamine Ancient Copper the other day, as one does, and he pointed out that if it was really ancient copper, it should be blue. It got me thinking, are there any copper range, like warm browns, inks that have a blue or green sheen to them that might actually look a bit like a copper patina?" So yeah, I had to like do some research on this. I was like, is that right? Because I know it patinas. I know copper patinas. I have a couple of copper pens. I actually have a tactile turn gist in copper that I am excitedly waiting for it to patina nicely. And then I have a copper mule, monograppa copper mule that I've been carrying around for lately that has really been patinaing nicely, if I can get it out of my sleeve. Yeah, so this one is really starting to turn some interesting colors. It was a bright, shiny copper when I first got it, and I intentionally don't want to polish it so that it starts to turn some crazy colors. It's starting to get a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, definitely got a heavy brown to it, some green sheening going on there, and you can even tell the difference between, even though these are two completely different pens, you can tell the difference there. Let me zoom out a little bit. That's what I've got going on there. So, yeah, there is no ink that I can think of that describes what it is that you are looking for here. And I think part of that is because of just the nature of the dye. You can't really do a dye-based ink that changes colors that drastically from like a brown to a blue. The only way you'd really be able to achieve that would be with pigmentation. which I suppose could happen. You know, you look at some of the Shimmertastics and the J. Herbon 1670s, and some of those have, you know, obviously some kind of pigment in them that is a very fine pigment, but it allows it to get kind of a different color than what you would get. So you can get like a gold flake or a silver flake within a black. I suppose you could get a blue flake within a brown if you did something similar like that, but there's no ink like that that currently exists. So I'll say I think it probably could be possible if you used some kind of pigment, but there's nothing like that that's been developed yet. Maybe that's maybe Diamine would come up with a Diamine True Ancient Copper or something like that, new Ancient Copper, whatever. Could be possible, but there's nothing like that out there. That would be cool though. All right, I got a personal question. This is from Marcel VS on Twitter. Says, if Brian had to choose only one pen and one ink to use for each day of the week, which would it be? And Rachel's choices. All right, so Marcel, I could not tell if you were asking me to pick just one pen and one ink to use for every day, or to use one pen and one ink each day. So I've been asked which one pen and ink would I choose a bunch of times. So I'm interpreting your question to be the latter. So I chose one pen and ink combination to use for each day of the week, based purely on my own personal preferences and which pens and inks I kind of navigate to. I did assign them to days of the week, but the days of the week are pretty arbitrary, so don't get too hung up on those. But I just have pens and ink that I really like. And I'm gonna show you the pens because I have them handy, and the ink I can't usually show. But first one would be Kyla Custom 74 with a medium nib. Of course, I love it. It's one of my all-time faves. It's my first gold nib pen, and I would use it with Noodler's Liberty's Elysium because it matches the pen. I love that ink too. So good combination there. That would be my Monday pen and ink. Tuesday would be a Lamy 2000 that I would use with an extra fine nib with Noodler's Black. That is the pen that I actually journal with at home, but I would carry that around on Tuesday. Next one would be Visconti Homo Sapiens in a fine nib. So just typical Homo Sapiens. I mean, I have a couple different ones, but I like the lava rock one, and you know, it's one of the things that it's made of volcano, so it's a good conversation piece when I talk to people. I would make that my Wednesday pen, and I would fill that with, I have to remember my combinations, Diamine Blue Velvet, which is actually, is that what I have in here right now? Oh yeah, it's good stuff. The next one for Thursday would be a Pilot Vanishing Point. And I pulled out the Twilight just because I'm really mean and cruel. This is a limited edition that's not available anymore. And this one I would have with a medium nib, and I like Diamine Red Dragon. It's one of my favorite inks. It's a nice red ink. That's what I would choose with this. Doesn't match the pen at all, but I don't care. It doesn't have to always match. Friday I would choose a Lamy All-Star in Ocean Blue. You know, just it's good to keep to your roots every now and then, you know, keeping an inexpensive steel nib pen with me because everything else I've mentioned so far has been pretty expensive. So I would have a Lamy All-Star in the Ocean Blue with a 1.1 stub nib. And for that blue color of the pen, I would choose Diamine Majestic Blue because that would look really nice with the stub. It's a wet ink. I like it a lot, and it would kind of match the pen. Next one would be on Saturday. I would choose a Pilot Metropolitan in the turquoise because I just really like this turquoise pen. And I would have that with Diamine Marine because that one does match this pen really nice. That's what I've got inked up in here right now. It's really portable, you know, whatever I'm doing on the weekend. I'm out and about a little bit more, so it's kind of more of a knock-around pen. And then for my Sunday pen, I am really going to pull out the stops here. Edison Nouveau Premier, of course, I helped develop that pen. Yes, I like it a lot. But this particular color I am carrying around because it's not available. It has not been for a very, very long time. We only made 50 pieces of this pen. This is the first limited edition Edison Nouveau Premier that we did. Gosh, how long ago was it now at this point? 5 years, more than 5 years. But this is the blue and black ebonite. So this is a polished ebonite. I like this a lot, and I would use it with, what ink did I say? Noodler's Apache Sunset. Just because I like that ink. Doesn't match the pen at all. But I chose a lot of blues already, so I just chose something completely random. For Rachel, you know, she doesn't change her pens quite as much as I do. I have a little more extensive of a collection than she does, as you may have seen before. But she's a big fan of the TWSBI 580 Alls. She's been like getting one of each color as she's been using them. She loves the broad nibs on those too. She's got a couple of Pelikan M600s that she really likes too, that she likes broads on. So I would say some combination of 580 and M600 with a broad nib that is using one of the Pilot Iroshizuku or the limited edition Pelikan Edelsteins, because she really likes tourmaline and like some of the other ones that she just kind of latches onto. So she's got a little bit more narrow taste than I do, but in any case, that's what she's got going on. Hope you enjoyed that question. A couple of business question and then a troubleshooting one to wrap it up. So business question for this week. This is yousillyllama on, I think it was Instagram, not sure, but that's what I'm going to say. So what does your office supply closet look like? The typical Bic pens and steno pads can't be right. Or is it preppies and rhodia pads, etc.? Do you use certain kind of printer paper that makes fountain pen use better? We don't have any Bics around here, I can say that much. If I do have one anywhere, it would be because I've used it in the past for demonstration purposes only, but no, we do not stock your typical Bic stick pens. Nothing wrong with the Bic company. I think they're a fine organization, but we just choose not to patronize their products. So the kind of the Bic of the office that we have here is a Pilot G2. We used to sell them. We tried selling them. We're big fans of Pilots. It's my preferred gel roller ball of choice. I know it's like a travesty that I have a cup here with some of these, but every now and then I need to whip one out for a video or something like that. And you know, I'll still use it from time to time. I use the fountain pens 99% of the time, but if I have to use something different, it'll be a G2. So those we keep a stock of just because, believe it or not everyone in our company loves fountain pens for all situations. You know, we're dealing with like, you know, shipping invoices and stuff like that. Sometimes a fountain pen is just not quite as practical for carbon paper and stuff like that. So we do use G2s around here. So we do keep a good stock of those, especially after we tried to carry them and then they did not work very well for us. So we discontinued them and we had a bunch of extra and we're like, well, guess we're keeping these. So now we have a good stock of those and all kinds of crazy patterns and stuff because they were the ones that no one wanted. Yeah, so, and as far as like our actual closet goes, we don't really have a supply closet, so to speak, which I know I guess sounds kind of weird, but it's more of a bookcase that's in the middle of a hallway. And we have, you know, a bin of like G2s and stuff like that. And we have other things, typical office-y things like tape and staples and all that kind of stuff, batteries, things like that. But we don't have a typical closet, and we don't really have a lot of paper either in our office supply hallway area. Because we sell paper here, so we do have a good stock of, you know, our normal printer paper, but which I'll get to in a second. But the rest of the paper, honestly, everybody around here uses different kinds of paper for different needs. So the rhodia pads are a big hit. The number 16 rhodia pads, especially for people who are, you know, writing quick notes and stuff like that. That works out really well. We use a lot of sticky notes, which are not super fountain pen friendly, but we just suck it up anyway. As far as everybody else, you know, the vast majority of people around here do really enjoy using fountain pens. So they get kind of into it. We give everybody a pen at their 90-day, and we'll pretty much get everybody into them. It's hard to be around pens this much and not get into them to some degree. But as far as what we're stocking, you know, everybody's got a different preference as far as notebooks go. So we'll just kind of like get everybody their preference and kind of take it offline and just get it off our shelves. So we don't have a big stockpile of notebooks and stuff like that, unless we get something where it's like cosmetically flawed or it's, you know, the corner's bent in shipping or something like that. And rather than, you know, putting them on bottom shelf or something, we'll put them aside and kind of use them here and there, but we don't have a steady stock of them. The one thing we do stock steadily is our paper. I've talked about this before, I think, and we've been using the same paper for a while now, but it's HP 24-pound laser jet paper. We keep a really healthy stock of it because we go through a bunch of it, but it's a good mixture of being fountain pen friendly and economical. It's not the most fountain pen friendly paper, but it's pretty darn good for the cost. So that's what we end up using for our actual printer paper, which if you were to come here and you use, well, if you've ever gotten any one of our receipts or invoices, you can write on it. You can see like it's pretty decent paper, and you can buy it at a fairly reasonable price. So, you know, I recommend that as some decent paper. I really like the HP 32-pound laser jet paper, but that's like 20 bucks a ream or something crazy. It's more than twice the price of the other stuff, so we don't quite go for that because that would be a little bit too much. But yeah, that's pretty much what we got going on in the Goulet pens supply closet, so to speak. Essentially our whole warehouse is a supply closet because everything we sell is like, you know, stuff that you could use in a typical office. So probably smaller and less impressive than you think, which is why I'm not showing you a picture of it, because it's really not that fancy. But that's what we got going on there. And then the last question I have, oh, I forgot to grab this off the shelf. Okay, this is a troubleshooting question from Country Mouse on Twitter. Having a terrible time getting the TWSBI Eco to dry out after flushing. Help. Allow me to roll over here real quick because I forgot to grab it. I tried to grab all my pens ahead of time, but I did not do so in this instance. Here we go. And then I need to get the little TWSBI Eco wrench. Okay, so I actually have the same thing going on in my Eco. You can see there I've even got a little bit of a water bubble in there. It's just part of the design. I don't know, for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to flush all the water out completely. First thing I want to say is that's okay. You don't need to flush out every last drop of water. When I clean a pen, what I'm doing is I am just trying to get the ink out of there. And if I'm changing the color drastically, I'll really clean it thoroughly. But if I'm not changing the colors drastically, I don't try to get like every drop of water out there, because I can even tell this water has got a little hint of blue to it. So I probably could have done a better job cleaning this one. But I'll take a paper towel after I've cleaned it and flushed it out to my liking. I will take a paper towel and I will touch the nib to the paper towel like so, and it'll suck all the water out of the feed. And then whatever water is left in here, honestly, is such a small amount, it's really not going to affect whatever ink you put in here next. It'll just you know, absorb into the water that's there. And again, unless it's like, you know, you really didn't do a good job cleaning it and you're putting in a completely different color, like if you have a black or a blue or something and there's a lot of it left in here, and then you put a yellow in or something, then it might actually affect the color. But otherwise, it's going to be such a small amount of dye that's actually in here, it's not really going to impact whatever the next color you put in. So you don't have to sweat it super hard, but if you do want to clean your Eco out more thoroughly, the nib and the feed can actually pull out of the pen relatively easily. You can take a Q-tip and kind of swab up in here, so that'll help right there. But then you can disassemble the pen. And the way you do that is you take and you put it down like that. You take your wrench that's included, it's actually in the bottom of your pen case, and you turn it clockwise, and then that will unscrew, whoa, lost it. That will unscrew your piston mechanism out of the pen. You got to give it a good number of turns to get it out of there, okay? And then it just pulls right out. And then, I might as well do this while I'm at it. I got some Q-tips here. So then you can just kind of Q-tip out of there. You can get all the water out. You can, you know, if you don't want to Q-tip it, or if you really want to make sure that it's really, really dry for whatever reason, if you want to store it for a long time, you just want to make sure it's dry, you just leave it out. Leave it out overnight and it'll be dry by the morning. And then you go to reassemble it. As long as you leave the piston and everything in the same place, it shouldn't be too bad to reassemble it. But if you need to look that up, I have a video on doing the 540, 580 assembly video, and it's the same concept there. You can take a few tries if you're doing it for the first time, but there you go. So it screws back in okay if you don't move the piston out. And then the nib and the feed can just plop back in there. And I think it can go in any orientation if I remember correctly. But it does have a certain grip to it, so just making sure you put it back in a way that's favorable to you. And that's really about it. And then your pen should be nice and dry and ready to go. Something nice about the TWSBIs is you have the ability to take them apart like that, and they give you the wrench to do so. So pretty cool. So hope that helps you out. This is definitely a shorter Q&A this week, but that's all right because I haven't eaten lunch yet, and I'm actually pretty hungry, so I'm gonna go eat lunch now. But I do have a question of the week before I end here. What's the longest that you've ever gone for cleaning your pen? So what's the longest you've ever put it off? And do you have any interesting stories related to that? For me, the most interesting one would be that Rachel had a Schaefer Prelude that she had with Noodler's Bay State Cape Cod Cranberry, I believe, that she lost in our garage for like 2 years. And we found it when we moved. And I cleaned out the pen and it actually cleaned out fairly reasonably. It wasn't too bad to clean out. So nothing too tragic there in the end. The pen still works fine and everything. But it definitely was like pretty well encrusted on there. It took some doing, but I was able to clean it up okay. So if you've gone longer than 2 years, I'd be curious to know. That's my interesting story to tell. So I hope you have a good weekend, a great rest of your week. A little bit shorter Q&A this week, but that's all right. I'll be back next week in kind of my normal routine. Hope you still enjoyed it. And if you liked any of the products here and you want to learn more about them, you can check them out on gouletpens.com. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And be sure to ask me some questions for next week on YouTube and on the blog. I'd appreciate that too. Leave me some comments, interact a little bit, that'd be great. All right, thanks so much for watching, and right on.